When my blood sugar crashed at Home Depot, paramedics rushed me to Phoenix General. The doctors called my son Jake. He never showed up. But my daughter-in-law Sara found time to post a family dinner photo with the caption, "Finally some peace without the old burden dragging us down." While I was alone in that hospital bed, they were toasting my absence with my own wine in my own house. That's when this 70-year-old widower realized I wasn't their father and grandfather. I was their ATM. So I made one phone call that would strip away everything they thought they'd stolen from me. By morning, their perfect little scam was about to become their worst nightmare. Who's the burden now? If you've ever felt abandoned by family when you needed them most, drop a comment and tell me what time it is where you're watching this. Sometimes the loneliest moments happen when we're surrounded by people who should care. The fluorescent lights in Phoenix General Hospital buzzed like angry wasps as I stared at my phone from the narrow hospital bed. My blood sugar had crashed while I was volunteering at Home Depot, helping a young couple pick out supplies for their first nursery. One moment I was explaining the difference between drywall screws and wood screws. The next I was waking up to paramedics checking my pulse. At 67, my body had apparently decided to remind me that skipping breakfast wasn't as harmless as it used to be. The doctor, a kind woman who looked younger than my granddaughter Mia, had stabilized my glucose levels and wanted to keep me overnight for observation. "Standard procedure," she'd said, especially for someone my age living alone. Living alone. Those words stung more than the IV needle in my arm. I wasn't supposed to be living alone. 4 years ago, after my wife Linda passed from cancer, my son Jake had promised things would be different. He'd take care of me. He'd said, we'd be a real family again. That promise felt like a lifetime ago as I scrolled through Facebook, waiting for Jake to show up like the hospital staff expected him to. The notification popped up just as a nurse came in to check my vitals. Sara had tagged me in a photo. How thoughtful of my daughter-in-law to think of me during my medical emergency. I thought maybe she was posting a get well message or letting our friends know I was okay. I tapped the screen and felt my chest tighten worse than any blood sugar crash. There they were, sitting around my old dining table in my house on Oak Valley Drive. Jake grinning at the head of the table where I used to sit every Sunday after Linda died. Back when they still pretended to want me around, Sara looked radiant in the chair that had been mine for 23 years. The one Linda had picked out when we'd bought our first real dining set. 14-year-old Mia was laughing at something off camera, her face bright with genuine happiness I hadn't seen in months. They were having what looked like an elaborate dinner party. Candles, wine glasses, the good china that Linda had saved for special occasions. My good china, technically, though nothing in that house felt like mine anymore. But it was the caption that made my hands shake. House feels so much lighter without dead weight around. Finally enjoying a peaceful family dinner. Blessed to have our space back. 43 likes already. My neighbor Mrs. Patterson had even commented with heart eye emojis. I stared at that screen for a full minute, letting the words rearrange everything I thought I knew about my place in this family. Dead weight, that's what I was to them. Not a father, not a grandfather, not even a person worth basic human decency. Just dead weight they were celebrating being rid of. The nurse returned with my discharge papers, her smile warm and professional. "Your son is coming to pick you up. Right, Mr. Steele, the doctor wants to make sure you have someone to monitor you tonight, just in case." I looked at the timestamp on Sara's post. 25 minutes ago, right around when Phoenix General would have called Jake about my condition. He knew exactly where I was. He'd chosen the dinner party instead. "Actually," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, "I'll call a taxi." As I waited in the hospital lobby, watching families reunite with their loved ones, I did something I hadn't done in 4 years. I pulled up Helen Davis's number in my contacts. Helen had been Linda's real estate agent when we'd bought the house on Oak Valley Drive back in 2001. She'd also been the one who'd helped us refinance when Linda got sick, always straight with us about our options. "Helen, it's Jonathan Steele," I said when she answered on the second ring. "Remember that house on Oak Valley Drive? You said would sell in a week if I ever wanted to list it. I'm ready." There was a pause. Helen was 72 and had been selling houses in Phoenix longer than most agents had been alive. She didn't waste time with small talk, but she also didn't miss the significance of a call like this. "Jonathan, honey, are you sure that's a big decision? Especially if you're not feeling well. Didn't Jake say you'd been having some health issues?" "My health is fine. Helen, it's my family that's making me sick. I could practically hear her nodding through the phone. Helen had raised 4 kids of her own and had probably seen every kind of family drama the suburbs could produce. How fast can you get the paperwork ready, I asked. That depends on how fast you want to move. With the right pricing, that house will have offers within 48 hours. But Jonathan, even with rush processing, we're looking at 30 days minimum for closing. Are you prepared for the reaction when Jake and Sara find out? I thought about Sarah's post, probably getting more likes and comments by the minute, people congratulating them on their peaceful family dinner while I sat alone in a hospital lobby. Helen, I've been prepared for this reaction for 4 years. I just didn't know it yet. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this mess. 4 years ago, I thought I was being the perfect father. Turns out I was being the perfect fool. It started the day we buried Linda. My wife of 38 years had fought pancreatic cancer for 18 months. I'd retired early from my engineering job to care for her, spending our savings on treatments that bought us time, but not miracles. When she died that cold February morning, I felt like half of myself had been ripped away. Jake had been so attentive during those final weeks. He'd visit daily with Sara and Mia, bringing groceries and checking on us both. I thought grief was bringing our family closer together. Dad, you shouldn't be rattling around in this big house all by yourself, Jake said 3 days after the funeral. We were sitting in Linda's garden, surrounded by the roses she'd never see bloom again. It's not healthy. Sara nodded sympathetically. All those memories everywhere? It must be overwhelming. I appreciated their concern. The 4-bedroom house did feel cavernous without Linda's laughter filling the rooms. Every corner held 38 years of shared life. What if we moved in temporarily? Jake continued. Just until you decide what you want to do long term. Mia could keep her school district, and you wouldn't be alone. It seemed perfect. I'd find a smaller place nearby, let them maintain the house, and still have family close. Sara assured me it was temporary. Maybe a year at most, until we save for our own place. I should have suspected something when Jake immediately started talking about property taxes and maintenance costs. How the house was such a financial burden on my fixed income. Never mind that Linda's life insurance and my pension meant money wasn't tight. Within 6 months, they'd moved in completely. I'd rented a small apartment across town, paying monthly rent while they lived mortgage-free in the house Linda and I had spent decades paying off. But here's what I didn't know then. They'd been planning this from the start. While I grieved, they systematically redirected my mail to help manage my affairs during this difficult time. Bank statements, investment notices, credit card offers. Everything started going to Oak Valley Drive, where they could screen what reached me. Just temporarily became 2 years, then 3, then 4. Every time I mentioned them finding their own place, there was a new crisis. Jake's job was unstable. Sara was having health issues. Mia was struggling with school transitions. I started feeling like an intruder in my former home. Visits became awkward. My belongings disappeared into storage or donation piles. They redecorated, painting over wallpaper Linda and I had chosen together. But the worst part wasn't losing the house. It was becoming invisible in my own family's life. Invitations to family events came later and later, if at all. Phone calls went unreturned for days. When I did visit, conversations felt strained, like I was interrupting something important. I told myself it was natural. Families evolve. Adult children need space. I was probably being too needy, too demanding of their time and attention. Sara's social media painted a picture of perfect family happiness. Hundreds of photos of Jake and Mia. Family vacations I'd never heard about. Dinner parties I'd never been invited to. When friends asked where I was, Sara would respond that I was going through some things and needed space to figure myself out. Going through some things like I was having a breakdown instead of just being systematically erased from their lives. But lying in that hospital bed, staring at her latest post, everything clicked into place. I wasn't the grieving widower who needed space and support. I was the inconvenient obstacle they had to manage until they could get rid of me permanently. The temporary arrangement had never been temporary at all. Helen arrived the next morning with coffee and a sharp-eyed woman who looked like she could intimidate a courtroom. Jonathan, this is Karen Mills, Helen said. Real estate attorney. Before we list your house, she needs to understand Jake and Sara's situation. Karen spread documents across my kitchen table. Was there any formal lease agreement, documented rent payments? No, just family helping family. Good and bad news. You retain ownership rights, but they might claim tenant protections after 4 years. Helen pulled out a folder. I researched your property. Tax records show several liens filed and released recently. Home improvement loans. Did you authorize those? Murray, my stomach dropped. I never authorized any loans. When did you last check your credit report? Karen asked. Maybe 3 years ago. Karen made quick phone calls while I sat there realizing how stupid I'd been. Within minutes, she handed me a printout that made my hands shake. Credit cards I'd never opened. Personal loans I'd never signed. Store accounts, gas cards, jewelry store credit, all showing Oak Valley Drive as my address. All current and in good standing. $95,000 in total debt, all in my name. The phone number on every account is Jake's cell, Karen said. He's been making minimum payments to avoid fraud alerts. The detailed statements told the story. Sarah's spa treatments, $300 monthly, Jake's gym and trainer, $450 monthly, expensive restaurants, designer clothes, weekend trips. Then I found Christmas, $12,000 at a Hawaiian resort while I spent holidays alone because they were keeping things simple. But the worst charges were the gambling sites, online poker, sports betting, casino platforms. Jake had been feeding a serious addiction with my stolen identity. Your son has a gambling problem, Karen said gently. He's been chasing losses with fraudulent credit. The jewelry purchased from my hospital day suddenly made sense. While I was on a gurney, Jake bought Sara a $1,500 necklace with my money. There's more, Karen continued. Background check shows inquiries from elder law attorneys and guardian assessment services. What does that mean? They've been building a guardianship case, the mail redirection, financial control, social isolation, classic elder abuse pattern leading to having you declared incompetent. Helen nodded grimly. They weren't just stealing money, honey. They were stealing your independence. I stared at the evidence. 95,000 stolen, 4 years of fraud, gambling addiction funded by identity theft, all building toward having me declared unfit to manage my own life. The systematic nature of it was breathtaking. While I grieved Linda and tried to be a good father, they'd been executing a long-term plan to destroy me financially and legally. How fast can we stop this? I asked. Karen's smile was sharp as a blade. Criminal charges today, house listing tomorrow. They picked the wrong old man to mess with. By evening, Mia stood at my apartment door, tears streaming, holding a small suitcase. Grandpa Jonathan, please don't make us homeless, she sobbed. Mom says we'll have to live in our car. My heart shattered. Using my 14-year-old granddaughter as an emotional weapon was a new low. Sweetheart, come inside. I guided her to my couch, noting Jake and Sara had stayed in their car. Close enough to coach, but far enough for deniability. They sent you here alone. Mia nodded. Mom packed my bag and said maybe if I talked to you, you'd remember that family takes care of each other. The manipulation was blatant. Mia, did your parents explain why I'm selling the house? They said you changed your mind about letting us live there, that you don't want us to be happy. I sat beside her carefully. Do you remember when Grandma Linda died and your family moved in? Yeah, to take care of it while you figured things out. It was supposed to be temporary. But what if I told you they've been using my name to borrow money for expensive trips you never got to enjoy? Her face scrunched. Dad said we couldn't afford our own house. Then maybe they shouldn't have spent $12,000 on Hawaii last Christmas. Her eyes widened. We didn't go to Hawaii. My blood ran cold. What did you do for Christmas? I stayed with Ashley's family. Mom and Dad said they had to visit sick relatives, but couldn't take me because I might catch something. They'd abandoned their daughter for a Hawaiian vacation on stolen money. What about that camping trip last month? Her face fell. We never went. Dad said it got canceled, but it was sunny all weekend. I wanted to take dessert photos with my camera, but had to stay at Ashley's again. Huh, where did your parents go? I don't know. Mom posted pictures from some fancy restaurant, but said it was just date night. I showed her the credit statements. That restaurant was in Las Vegas. They spent the weekend gambling while you stayed with friends. She stared at the papers. They lied to me. Yes, sweetheart. They've been lying to both of us. A car horn honked, Jake's signal. Mia, you're not going to be homeless, I promise. But I can't let your parents keep stealing money that should benefit you. The horn honked again. I walked her downstairs, holding her hand. Jake rolled down his window. Well, did you talk sense into her? I leaned down. Jake, if you ever use your daughter as manipulation again, I'll add child endangerment to the criminal charges I filed this morning. His face went white. What charges? Identity theft, fraud, forgery. The $95,000 you've stolen using my name. Sara leaned over. That money went to family needs. Family needs like Hawaii that Mia didn't go on Las Vegas she didn't know about. I opened the back door. Mia, you're coming with me. Your parents need to learn how to be actual adults. 3 days later, Lisa Wells called from Miami. Sarah's estranged sister. Someone I'd met maybe twice. Mr. Steele, please don't hang up. I saw the news about criminal charges. I need to tell you something important. Her voice had urgency that made me listen. I called Sara last week trying to understand what happened. I thought maybe there was some misunderstanding. I braced for another guilt trip. But she was angry, not thinking clearly. She admitted details about their plan that I don't think she meant to share. My blood went cold. What plan? She said you'd forced their hand by fighting back, that they'd been planning to wait longer before starting guardianship proceedings, but your behavior made them move too quickly. She admitted to planning guardianship. More than that, she said they had been consulting attorneys for months about documenting your supposed mental decline. Recordings of you sounding confused, photos of you looking disheveled, neighbor testimony about erratic behavior. I felt sick. Lisa, why are you telling me this? Long pause. Because 15 years ago, Sara did this to our grandparents. My heart stopped. Grandma Rose and Grandpa Frank were in their 80s, living independently, completely sharp. But they had $180,000 in savings, plus their Coral Gables house. Wait, what happened? Sara moved in after Grandpa's minor stroke. Within 18 months, they were both in nursing homes with supposed dementia, and Sara had power of attorney. There'd be money is gone, all of it. Sara claimed medical expenses, but numbers never added up when they died 2 years later. Nothing was left. Family was too grief-stricken to investigate. Lisa's voice broke. I should have warned you when Jake married her. I thought maybe I was wrong. Would you provide a sworn statement? Absolutely. And Mr. Steele, I kept some of their papers. Financial records that didn't make sense then. Bank transfers, forged signatures, inflated medical bills. They might help your case. After hanging up, I stared at my phone. Sara wasn't just a thief. She was a predator who systematically destroyed elderly family members who trusted her. I called Karen immediately. We need to expand the investigation. Sara's done this before. Her own grandparents, $180,000. Same pattern. Karen was quiet. Jonathan, this changes everything. If we can prove a pattern, we're looking at racketeering, organized criminal activity. How strong is our case? With Lisa's testimony and those records strong enough that Sara and Jake are going to prison for a very long time, this wasn't just family betrayal anymore. It was a pattern of elder abuse that had destroyed multiple lives and was only stopped because I fought back instead of becoming another victim. My older brother Ben showed up the next morning with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse and the grim expression of someone who'd spent 30 years as a Phoenix police detective. Jonathan, we need to talk, he said, settling his 70-year-old frame into my kitchen chair. I've been doing some digging since you called about the criminal charges. Ben had always been the careful one. The brother who checked facts twice and trusted nobody until they proved themselves. When Linda died, he'd been the only family member who'd questioned Jake and Sara's sudden helpfulness. So, what did you find? He spread photographs and documents across my table. Remember how Jake always said he worked in tech sales? Turns out he was fired 18 months ago for embezzling company credit card numbers. Sara's spa business never existed. She's been running fake invoices through your accounts. My stomach dropped. How fake? $300 a month for Serenity Wellness Spa that's actually just a P.O. box. Her gym membership, Jake's trainer, even Mia's supposed tennis lessons. All fake businesses they created to justify the credit card charges. Ben pulled out bank statements. But here's the smoking gun. They've been transferring money from your fraudulent accounts into a joint savings account. Guess what they've been saving for? I'm afraid to ask. A house in Sedona. They put a down payment on a $400,000 property last month. They were planning to move there after they had you declared incompetent and sold your house. The systematic planning was breathtaking. They'd been building their escape route while destroying my life. There's more. Ben continued. I contacted my old partner at Phoenix PD. Jake's been arrested twice for domestic disturbance calls. Sara called police claiming he was violent, then dropped charges both times. Classic pattern for insurance fraud or manipulation. What about the guardianship case? Ben's jaw tightened. They filed preliminary paperwork 3 weeks ago. Medical affidavits claiming you've been showing signs of dementia, financial irresponsibility, inability to care for yourself. All lies, but they had documentation to support it. What kind of documentation? Photos of you looking confused at family gatherings. Recordings of phone conversations where you supposedly sounded disoriented. Testimony from neighbors about erratic behavior. I remembered Sara always insisting on taking photos at family events. Even when I felt tired or unwell, Jake recording our phone calls, claiming it was for his work. The neighbors they'd befriended, probably feeding them stories about my declining mental state. Ben, they've been planning this for years. That's what makes this criminal conspiracy instead of just theft. Karen Mills called me this morning. With Lisa's testimony from Florida and the evidence we've gathered, the DA is filing racketeering charges. The phone rang. Helen Davis with news I'd been waiting for. Jonathan, we have 3 cash offers on your house. Highest bid is $520,000. $15,000 over asking. They want to close in 2 weeks. Take it, I said without hesitation. Ben smiled grimly. That's going to cut off their funding real fast. 2 hours later, Karen called with the news I'd been hoping for. Jonathan, Phoenix PD just arrested Jake and Sara. Multiple felony charges including identity theft, elder abuse, fraud, and racketeering. They're being held without bail. What about Mia? She stays with you. Child Services investigated based on our evidence of abandonment and neglect. You're officially her temporary guardian. I looked out my apartment window at Mia sitting on the small balcony, editing photos on her laptop. For the first time in 4 years, she looked genuinely peaceful. How strong is the case, Karen? With the Florida connection, the fake businesses, the guardianship fraud, and Ben's police evidence, they're looking at 15 to 20 years each. Good, I said, and meant it. Justice was finally coming. But more importantly, Mia was safe. And the house that Linda and I had built our life in would go to people who'd actually appreciate it instead of parasites who saw it as just another asset to steal. 6 months later, I sat in Maricopa County Superior Court watching my son try to explain away 4 years of systematic theft and fraud. Jake looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, his hair graying at the temples in a way that reminded me painfully of myself at his age. For a moment, I felt the old paternal instinct to protect him, to find some way to minimize his suffering. Then I remembered Mia spending Christmas with strangers while he gambled in Hawaii on my stolen money. Your Honor, Jake's public defender was saying, my client was struggling with gambling addiction and made poor decisions during a difficult time. His father's declining mental health created a crisis situation that required immediate financial intervention. I almost laughed. Even now, they were sticking to the story that I was the problem. District Attorney Patricia Valdez stood to present the state's case. She was thorough and merciless, walking the jury through every forged signature, every fraudulent account, every lie Jake and Sara had told. The defendants didn't just steal money, she said, holding up the guardianship papers. They systematically destroyed Mr. Steele's reputation, isolated him from friends and family, and were weeks away from having him declared legally incompetent. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated elder abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing $95,000 in fraudulent debt. Lisa Wells' testimony about Sara's previous victims in Florida. Ben's police investigation revealing the fake businesses and Sedona house purchase. But it was Mia's victim impact statement that sealed their fate. My granddaughter, now 15 and more confident than I'd seen her in years, stood at the podium and spoke directly to her parents. You taught me that family takes care of each other, she said, her voice steady. But you never took care of anyone except yourselves. You abandoned me for vacations I never knew about. You used Grandpa's love against him while stealing his money. You made me lie to him about where you were going. Jake was crying now, finally understanding what he'd lost. Sara stared straight ahead, showing no emotion. The defendant, Jacob Steele, Judge Martinez announced, is sentenced to 30 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years probation. The defendant, Sara Steele, receives 24 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years probation. Both defendants are ordered to pay full restitution of $95,000 plus court costs. The gavel came down with finality. But the real victory came afterward, in the courthouse hallway, when the judge granted me permanent custody of Mia. "Mr. Steele," Judge Martinez said privately, "I've seen a lot of elder abuse cases. What your son and daughter-in-law did was particularly cruel because they used your love for family against you. But you fought back, and that probably saved other potential victims." Jake tried to approach me as the bailiffs led him away. "Dad, I'm sorry, I never meant for it to go this far. The gambling got out of control, and Sara said we just needed time to figure things out." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and failed somehow, and felt mostly sadness. "Jake, you had 4 years to figure things out. Instead, you chose to destroy your daughter's trust and your father's life. I hope prison gives you the time you need to become the man your mother thought you could be." Walking out of that courthouse with Mia's hand in mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 4 years. Peace. Not the fake kind that comes from avoiding conflict, but the deep satisfaction of knowing I'd refused to be anyone's victim. The money would be repaid eventually. The house was sold to a young family who'd actually appreciate it. Most importantly, Mia was safe and thriving. Justice wasn't just served, it was earned. 18 months later, I'm sitting on the deck of my new house in Sedona, Arizona, watching Mia set up her camera equipment for a golden hour photo shoot. The red rocks glow like fire in the evening light, and my granddaughter has never been happier. We used part of the money from the Oak Valley Drive sale to buy this smaller place. 3 bedrooms with enough space for Mia's photography studio and a workshop where I can tinker with woodworking projects. The rest went into a college fund that Jake and Sara can never touch. Mia's photography has flourished here. She's won 2 state competitions and has been accepted to Arizona State University's journalism program with a partial scholarship. The girl who used to be abandoned during family vacations now documents the beauty of the Southwest with an artist's eye. "Grandpa Jonathan, come look at this shot." She calls from the garden where Linda's roses have found new life in the desert soil. I walk over to see her camera's display screen. It's a perfect capture of light and shadow, the kind of image that makes you stop and really see the world. "That's going in your portfolio," I tell her. "Already planning on it," she grins. The admissions counselor said my desert series shows real maturity for someone my age. The criminal restitution process took over a year, but we eventually recovered about $70,000 of the stolen money. Jake's prison wages and Sara's community service earnings are garnished until the debt is paid. Justice delayed, but not denied. I volunteer at the Arizona Elder Abuse Prevention Center now, helping other people recognize the warning signs of financial exploitation. It's heartbreaking how common these stories are, and how often the abusers are family members who exploit trust and love for financial gain. Sometimes people ask if I regret how everything turned out, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The answer is simple. I regret that it took me 4 years to recognize what was happening. I regret enabling their behavior by accepting the temporary arrangement instead of setting clear boundaries from the start. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret refusing to accept their narrative that I was dramatic, demanding, or incompetent. I don't regret protecting Mia from parents who cared more about funding their lifestyle than raising their daughter. Jake calls occasionally from prison, usually when he wants something: money for commissary, help with his appeals process, or intervention with Mia, who rarely accepts his calls. I keep these conversations short and civil, but I don't pretend we have the relationship we used to have. Some trust, once broken by systematic betrayal and theft, can't be fully repaired. That's not bitterness talking. That's wisdom. Last week, he called with what sounded like genuine remorse. "Dad, I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that losing you and Mia has been worse than losing my freedom. I threw away the 2 most important people in my life for money that's gone anyway. Jake, I hope you mean that, because when you get out, you'll need to prove it through actions, not words." "I will, I promise. I've heard his promises before. Time will tell if prison has taught him the value of keeping them. What I have now is something I'd forgotten was possible. Peace without apology. Real peace, not the fake kind that comes from avoiding conflict at any cost, but the deep satisfaction of knowing I refuse to be anyone's victim." As I finish writing this story, Mia calls me over to see her latest photograph. She's captured a sunset that turns the whole sky into a canvas of gold and purple. with the ancient red rocks standing like monuments to endurance. This one's called New Beginnings when she says, I'm entering it in the National Geographic Youth Photography Contest. Smart kid. She learned early that sometimes you have to fight for your right to begin again. Every Grandpa Stories collection needs tales of redemption, and mine proves that God never abandons those who seek justice. When I felt most alone in that hospital bed, staring at Sarah's heartless words, the Lord was already orchestrating my comeback. Sometimes our darkest moments become the foundation for our greatest victories. The truth about family loyalty is this: it must flow both ways. I spent 4 years believing that good fathers sacrifice everything for their children, even when those children are destroying them. But Grandpa Stories teach us that unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional tolerance of abuse. God calls us to love wisely, not blindly. Through this nightmare, I learned that betrayal reveals character, not just of those who betray, but of those who choose how to respond. I could have become bitter, could have let Jake and Sarah's greed poison my heart. Instead, God showed me that protecting Mia and seeking justice wasn't revenge, it was responsibility. The most profound Grandpa Stories remind us that our legacy isn't just what we leave behind, but what we refuse to leave behind. I refuse to leave Mia in the hands of manipulative parents. I refuse to let elder abuse go unpunished. With divine guidance, I chose courage over comfort. Stories like mine happen every day to families across America. If you recognize the warning signs in your own life, don't wait 4 years like I did. Share this story if it resonated with you. Comment with your thoughts on family boundaries, and subscribe to hear more stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength when they need it most.